So today's episode is all about the PMO, working within the confines of the PMO, whatever PMO means.
PMO. Is that people management organization or project management organization, or is it product?
Project management organization. That's not what the O stands for, is it? Project management
Office is what
project management office. Yeah, that's the one that I'm used to. Whenever anyone says I'm working for the PMO, that's in my head. That's what goes off. I was at one place where it was a product management office. But like under the covers, it wasn't really different.
Same beast with a different name.
Yeah. I don't know. So like this is kind of more your topic than it is mine, because I was never a project manager. So I don't really like, from my understanding, I was only at one organization that had a very, very large, mature PMO. That basically the PMO was like it was coupled with like. It's an old school type of organization. Not a bad thing. It's just the organization was a very old company. They've been around a long time. So basically, the way the organization was set up was when somebody wanted to perform some kind of software project, something with a defined start and end date. Like, I want to replace this system company wide with this new system, or I have this old piece of software. And it's we've been using it for 8, 9, 10 years or whatever, and somebody identifies it as a risk, or they do an audit. Or so big companies do that occasionally, just do an audit of all their IT systems or whatever. IT systems. There's another word that's kind of going out of style. IT systems, right? But they'll do an audit of all their information systems. And I'm not making it any better by using different, and they'll say, well, these systems are X years old, or maybe they'll do some kind of financial accounting thing where they say, you have X. They do that with laptops. Companies do that with laptops too. They say, you've used the same laptop. They'll come into your work center and be like, you've used the same laptop for 4 years. It's time for a new one, and you'll say, but there's nothing wrong with this one, and they'll tell you, well, finance tells us you're due for a replacement. You need to get a replacement, because on the books they're calculating a dollar figure of how much money the company either spends on keeping that laptop in service, or spends on having you have a new one or whatever. And that the spreadsheet came back with a number that says the company now has to pay dollars rather than, it costs more to keep your laptop in service and have you on old equipment and slow equipment and stuff like that. I understand the reasons. I'm not trying to. Like, if I'm going to go pick a fight, that is not where I'm going to pick a fight of why companies say that things need to be changed. We can deal with that later. But in this instance, to bring us back to the story at hand, I work for the project management office, and the project management office had a team of project managers. They had a whole army of project managers, basically. And when somebody from the business would come in, they would get put in contact. Usually, they would contact like the manager of the department. I can't remember what his real title was, but they'd contact one head official in the department and say, "Hey, I want to do whatever. Here's how much money I want to get it done." And, usually, they would come with what they want to get done and when they want to get it done by and how much money. They would come with all the pieces of the iron triangle. So I don't know what magic those guys would perform in their. Before anybody actually got involved, but there was some magic that was performed before anyone got involved. And then from there, the PMO would spin up a team for them, and this is like an old school project. So they'd go to a project manager. The project manager would do their plan. Everything you do is like a PMP project. All their project managers were PMP project managers. So they would kind of scope out what the work is. They had an army of business analysts that also worked in the department as well. So I can't remember how many people the department actually owned, but I remember the PMO owned business analysts, and they owned project managers, and they owned a few more resources, but I can't remember. I can't remember. They were pretty typical as far as the old school PMO goes.
Yeah, the structure you're describing is one that's been around a long, long time.
Yeah.
Right? Like you said, traditional project management was delivered through PMOs for large organizations, at least. Even medium-sized organizations started to have those, right? Because there was there was a sense that the project managers needed to be organized in some way and managed.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that people were delivering projects in their own way. So given 5 project managers, you're going to find the way they deliver projects varied. And so for consistency's sake, PMOs were born.
Yeah.
Right. PMOs had their place before we started working in an agile way. But even now, PMOs still exist. They're quite pervasive, in fact. But one of the best things that happened out of the PMOs of old was the fact that they try to standardize everything by saying, this is how you deliver a project. First you do this, then you do this, then you do this, etc.
Yeah.
So they try to come up with some sort of almost like a run book and said, this is how to deliver a project. So you're new into the organization as a project manager, take this run book and this is going to set you up for success. That was the idea behind it, right? The place where it fell apart is, every project, even though it has a distinct start and an end, is a unique endeavor.
Right.
So you somehow have to flex a little, right, in the way you deliver them. But over the years, what's happened is people's mindsets became kind of fixed, and didn't really open up to the fact that every project is unique and you do need to change your ways.
Yeah.
So PMOs have been around a long time. They've come around with all of these quote unquote standards at the PMO level that you're supposed to abide by. And for the most part, they kind of sort of worked because in the old days, like you said, you were presented with all 3 pieces of the iron triangle and you had to somehow finagle your way through that. Usually what gave was budget because people didn't want to flex on scope.
Yeah.
And the timeline correspondingly changed as well. So if you look at it from that definition, PMOs were stood up for those purposes I outlined, right? And now what you find is PMOs have morphed.
Yeah.
So now they're sticking the word agile as has become vogue in front of it. So now you've got APMOs, right? Agile PMOs. And if you peel back the layers, it's the same old PMO, just with the name Agile in front. And you can tell that because the way they're working hasn't changed, and it needs to. You can't just call yourself an Agile PMO and become an Agile PMO.
Yeah. I don't. I can't recall. I can't recall. Like some of the other. I was a BA at this organization. Some of the other BAs were a lot closer to the project start than I was. But I recall that whenever they would have a project start, it would be some manager or some other department. Like when I say manager, like normal people would translate that into like a VP or a partner level person. But this is a pretty big organization to have PMOs. But basically, what would happen is there was lots of other departments, and whatever departments had the department heads of other departments, they had budgets, and they would come to the PMO and say, "Hey, I need to replace this piece of software that I have by." The end of the year, or replace it by the end of the next year, or whatever. Usually, they were facing some kind of like directive or whatever to say, replace any system over X amount, or they got hit on an audit and they were under the gun to get it done by whenever the audit gave them, whenever they're going to go through their next audit, basically.
Yeah, it's usually some sort of compliance or regulatory mandate, right, that causes these changes to come about.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that was the way I remember a lot of work coming in. And then sometimes they would get work from their like board of directors or whatever to some kind of new initiative or whatever, and then they would pull in the A team to do whatever. But these were all projects. They had starts and they had ends, and then when everyone was done, you'd go off on other projects and stuff like that. They weren't really building. It wasn't like you had a project manager who was building a team to develop and maintain software, and then that team would then be part of the company or whatever for some new initiative. That wasn't what they were doing. They were spinning up people, and they would do whatever their job was, and everyone knew the basic length of their contracts. And then, like you said, like the time would flex, or the budget would flex, or sometimes if they would blow past their time, they'd decrease the size of the teams or whatever. They would basically mess with one of the sides of the triangle to get wherever they're going. you know, and that's the games. It's not really a game. That's the profession that they were in. You know, if they weren't going to get more money, which all the project managers were very good at they weren't trying to hide anything. I guess like I'm not trying to explain it. Like I was. I probably could have stayed there for a while because those guys were very good at their job, and they would go in front of the whatever, I can't remember, the panel or what, they had some kind of leadership panel or whatever that got updates like once a month, or I don't remember what it was, once every other week. I can't remember what it was. Steering committee, I don't remember what it was, but it would basically say, you know, this is where the project's at. If we you know, invest X more dollars or whatever, then we can get this. Otherwise, whatever. And they would do their change orders and like that. You know, they get things signed off like that.
Yeah, it's usually a steering committee, right?
Yeah.
And you know, typically they get updates frequently,
Yeah.
but they meet at the phase gate to say, you know, where are we at?
Yeah, right.
It's a checkpoint.
Right. Yeah.
Proceed to the next
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, yeah. That's the way they would conduct business. I mean, it's efficient. I mean, it becomes very difficult to change the direction of the ship in that kind of model. You know.
Yeah, it is efficient, but is it effective? Because what happens is you're not delivering the end result until the last milestone is met.
Yeah.
And by that stage, either the business's needs have changed, or lots of the messaging and in terms of the wants and the needs have become morphed over time. So what they see at the end isn't quite what they had in mind. But worse than that is the fact that when budget runs out, what do they have, right? Do they have anything that's usable? If you're going to wait till the end, then you don't have that. You don't even have UAT in some cases, right? So you have this thing that's partially baked. It hasn't been fully tested. You run out of money. Right. Now what happens? There's been many, many projects that were just simply abandoned.
Yeah.
And that's a waste, right? So effective, I don't know about that, right? Efficient only for the purpose of that time box, perhaps, but I'd much prefer to work in a way where you're incrementally delivering usable product so that when money does run out, maybe you don't have everything, but you have something that's usable. It's deployable out in the field.
Yeah, that's I would venture to guess that like that's not the way that that particular organization or other organizations that are structured like that, that's not their main goal. Like if effectiveness is not the number one priority.
Yes,
it is a very strange thing to say out loud, and I realize how it comes across, but it's not. It's like the writing software for the government. Like efficiency is not their number one concern. You know. All the regulatory, making sure everyone's happy and stuff like that, like that's their main concern over efficiency. Yeah, there may be more than that that I'm not thinking of right now, but like, it's very strange. But it may be true. So the PMO. So now the organization is going to say, well, we're gonna go agile. All right. So now they strap an agile onto the front of their PMO. Now they're an agile PMO. Now, how does that work?
Well, here's a great question. So, a lot of times when they do that, they really don't know where they want to end up. They don't have an end in mind. They simply are, in many cases, actually jumping on the bandwagon, right? So they stick the word agile in front. You know, best case scenario, get all your PMPs retrained and make them certified Scrum Masters of some kind. But they come back and do exactly what they did before, right? They come back and they do statuses all day long, right? They work on their Gantt charts ad nauseum. They predict what somebody should be doing or will be done by on a given date out in the future, which is an impossibility, but they predict that. So the work practices remain the same, and that's sad, right? Some organizations, what they do is they'll pick some, you could say cherry pick, some projects that they believe could be easy to deliver in an agile way and kind of get their foot in the door that way. And that's great, because if they did it right, that would show them how to actually deliver projects through an agile PMO. And one of the characteristics of an agile PMO is kind of drifting away from this prescriptive idea of, you know, here is a run book that you use for your projects, because projects are unique, right? So they're going to come up with guidelines, but with enough leeway for whoever's kind of helping steer the project, and not a project manager as such, because that role doesn't exist. A scrum master, or better yet, all team members. So the guidelines are there, so they don't go off the rails, but there's enough leeway there for them to find their own path, right? And that's rare. Even today, that's rare in an Agile PMO.
Yeah, I would expect it would be rare, because you have to. There's in an Agile PMO, I would expect that there are certain metrics or numbers or whatever that they're looking at on a regular basis, and that may not be there for Agile projects that are running in parallel with your other projects. So you basically need to. You would basically need to change your reporting method to report old style for your traditional projects that are running, and then pivot to have a different section to be like, now I'm going to report on my Agile projects, and use a completely different metric setup. I don't know if your steering committee or whoever you're reporting to is going to go for that. Yeah, they would have to, but I don't know if they would go for that.
They don't understand the difference, right? Because they grew up, using the old RAG statuses and whatnot, red, amber, green, the traffic lights or whatever. But you can still adopt that model and fit it on top of your Agile project. You don't have to give them what I call vanity metrics, right? Because they don't understand story points and all this sort of stuff. They don't understand that. They haven't been kind of exposed to that. So I think what we need to do in that scenario is to say, is it on track? Is the question that they always ask you, right? And on your one sheet for the steering committee where you have your traffic lights, so keep them there. Is it on track, right? If it's amber, let them know that, right? Don't hide it. Let them know, just the same as you would with a traditional project that you reported on. And so if you do that, you're kind of bridging the gap and making it easier for them to understand that even though it's an Agile project, we're still giving you the messaging you want, right? But at the end of every kind of messaging, like this steering committee update, you still need to point them in the direction of, this is the end result. Yep. We're going to finish in 5 sprints. But if you say that, then again, you're introducing the word sprint. So you say it's going to be in 2.5 months, right? If it's 2-week sprints. Yeah. I think it's up to the Agile PMO to kind of facilitate that with their people. Mm-hmm. If they did that, I think they'd be more successful.
That's like we just touched on a whole mess of different things that I would like to dig into. I'm gonna. Because I know I'm going to forget in like 30 seconds of all the different things. We talked about. I'm already forgetting. It's already slipped my mind. It's not. But we already talked about you need to when you bring up an Agile project, you can't just have a project manager become a Scrum Master and send them in or whatever. They basically need to be trained as an Agile coach. If you're going to go that route, I don't know if you're going to go that route. I don't know if that's a great route to go, but maybe there's other. I'm trying to think of how to retrofit. Where my brain's going, I'm trying to think of how to retrofit the PMO to be able to maintain Agile projects. I don't think it would be that difficult. The problem is I say Agile projects, but that term has no meaning, because you're going to bring on a team to maintain something, to build and maintain something. So unless you're going to commit to saying, hey, this project, this initiative or whatever, the people that developed this software for us, we're gonna say that software has a 2-year life cycle, 3-year life cycle. So we're going to maintain. We're going to commit to bring on a team and whatever, and we're going to staff up to these levels or whatever for X amount of time, and then staff down for X amount of time. You kind of have to know how many people you're going to need, because the concept of an Agile project is a team that delivers you features. You're not just spinning up and after 6 months you're cutting your whole team and then everyone's gone.
Right. So that actually is what happens in a traditional PMO.
Yeah.
Usually that's in a matrixed environment.
Right.
So you end up borrowing people from different areas
Right.
for the duration of the project.
Yeah.
And as soon as the project's over, people go back.
Go away.
And then when the next project is spun up, you're not likely to get the same people back anyway, right? And that's where I think the way an Agile PMO could structure itself could be different in that they can have these teams that stay together, and the same team would deliver similar types of projects.
Yeah.
But within the confines of that, you still need to give people enough lateral movement to move to other projects that they may be interested in. So if you've got something coming up with, say, machine learning, right? Somebody's interested in that.
Sure.
They need to be able to feel free to move to that area. But to your point about maintenance, so Agile teams can be maintenance teams, right? Agile projects are a description of the actual process, but the way you deliver them in an Agile way really isn't that different, whether you're building features or whether you're maintaining, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're using a different framework, like instead of using some sort of framework like Scrum, you're using maybe Kanban,
Yeah.
if you're a maintenance team, where the workload is perhaps less predictable.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the way you deliver projects in an Agile way, it can still be applied, right, within the confines of an Agile PMO.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great method. It'd be a very stable, predictable method for someone who's managing money, for enterprise wide, to say like this is the phase of my project when I was in Scrum, and after I know that I'm only in maintenance mode, or what they call it. I can't remember what they called it at the original. It was like a hypercare period or something like that. They had a thing that was like the main bulk of the development was over, but they knew they were going to have bug fixes and small features or whatever. They had a name for that. I think it was hypercare,
Yeah.
aftercare or something.
Hypercare is one word they've used.
remember.
White glove care, all this sort of
some
stuff.
some kind of like allotted, because usually you'll do that. You'll either spin up teams yourself, or you'll have some kind of contracted agreement with the vendor who does it for you, where they'll maintain a few people or whatever for 2-3 months or whatever to fix things, and then before their main team rolls off, and then it's basically yours to figure out and do with as you. But that kind of thing is like, this will be your period when you'll have teams or multiple teams in Scrum, and then this will be your period where we'll support you in Kanban, where it's just bug fixes, and where, like, instead of tracking and measuring your business value, whatever, now we're going to track your flow rate. And I guess you can still track business value through Kanban as well.
You absolutely can if you've got an owner for that, right?
You're right. Well, so I guess you could change everything when you change from Scrum when you change from active development mode to maintenance mode. I guess you could change everything. I don't know why you would. I mean, it would make a lot of sense to keep the same product owner.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We're going to assume it's 1 or 2 teams for the purposes of this theoretical that we've got ourselves onto. But like, it would make a lot of sense to keep the same product owner, and let them be there, for all the active development, and then through the maintenance period, to basically keep the same hand on the wheel. In reality, like, successful product owners are not that way. The organization is going to look to take them and ship them somewhere else and have them be successful somewhere else. I completely understand that, but that would be. I mean, that would be for a larger organization. Those kind of people would be a very in-demand commodity, to have those inside of your, I guess Agile PMO is that's the bounds of what we're talking about right now.
However, I agree with you, but I think what happens, or what we see is, once the project is deployed and it goes into this hypercare mode, then it becomes the kind of the responsibility of some sort of an operations team, which is not from the business.
Yeah.
They're just there to keep the lights on.
Right.
And in an outsourcing model, you're right. So usually it's outsourced to a vendor that keeps a few people around from the original team, or sometimes not. It's just people that have some basic skills to care for the product. And so 2 things happen there. You lose some valuable domain knowledge because your product owner is gone, right? Because now the ops person has taken over. And then the other side of it is, from the team perspective, you don't have that knowledge either, because you don't have those core team players now. You just got these somewhat junior people that
Yeah.
are just there to, break fix, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So in that environment, the Agile PMO really doesn't have a lot of control over things, right? Because of the organizational structure. So the structure gets in the way here. If you've got an ops team, I don't see any reason why it should be a separate environment, like a separate department, if you like,
Right, yeah,
within
right.
the organization. It
Yeah.
should be part of the Agile PMO.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And let your team members move around, because there's nothing more demotivating as a team member than just to work on break fixes.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
it can be done.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could see, nobody wants to be the maintenance developer. Like,
Right.
I learned that early in my career. Like when I was brand new, my first job, I was like, they had one guy who was the permanent maintenance developer. Wow, this is a segue. Oh my goodness, I have not thought about this guy in a long time. His name was Steve. I remember his name, and he was a real funny dude. He was a real funny guy, and he was a maintenance developer, and he was at a point in his life or whatever where he didn't mind being the maintenance developer, but it only lasted until he like improved his life situation. And then he was like, I don't want to just do maintenance, because nobody just wants to do maintenance forever. I mean, I guess it would be okay if there's a certain cadence to being the maintenance developer, that it's actually a pretty sweet gig if you think about it. Like if you built the software, think about it that way. Okay, think about it that way. I'm not talking about coming in and just like getting a job where like you're not building anything new, and like that's a hard sell through the interview. I mean, they're probably going to hide that from you in the interview that you're not going to do any new work or whatever, or work with new technologies or whatever. But yeah, I remember he was fine with it, because he was like, "Hey, look, man." He was a young guy too. He was like, "Oh, look, man." Like he came in right when the main project was ending. And when the main project was ending, a lot of the team members had left and moved on. So the people that he was there with weren't there anymore. So he had a certain amount of autonomy in that nobody really knew what the hell he was doing. But his job was super relaxed. It was for what he had gone through a very stressful period in his life for whatever personal reasons or whatever he was going through, and he was just like, oh man, I come in. He came in about 9:30 or so. He kind of breezed in, kind of did his stuff, took an early lunch. He was a maintenance developer, man. Like nothing was super high burning priority. Like that product didn't get those kind of bugs. Where stuff blew up because it didn't get that kind of features. It didn't get those kind of big feature enhancements where we had big things. And he enjoyed it for a while, but he didn't last more than a year, because he just like nobody wants to be the maintenance developer all their career.
No, it's usually people that are, at the sunset of their careers that just want to ride it out and retire. But if you weren't involved in building the software, I mean that's tough.
That's a
cleaning
tough
up
sell,
somebody
yeah.
else's, right?
Yeah, that's a
it's
tough
not
sell.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a tough sell going into the job interview. Like, oh, so what do you guys do here? Well, we work with, this technology, and it's a little bit old. And I remember the company I worked for had a tool that was basically a scripting engine. They had a tool that was basically a scripting engine. Wow, this is another this is the blast from the past episode. Oh man, they had a tool that was a scripting engine, and the scripts, the tool would basically run the scripts, and the scripts were written in VB6. I remember this is how people occasionally someone will tell me like, oh, I started my career working on VB scripting. I was like, I happen to know something about VB scripting myself. But it was funny because the tool basically launched VB scripts to do some of this is like before the term AI was coined in software development, when just some kind of garbage tool that ran a garbage script to do garbage tasks wasn't considered like cutting edge. It was considered like engineering grunt work, because that's exactly what this was. It was engineering grunt work, just doing random things that like they weren't worth us developing into our main applications, but they were easy enough where an engineer who could write a custom script just had like a library of custom scripts. They would just go grab the function they needed, and they would throw it in. I don't even know if VB6 used functions. I can't remember. But they would go grab the function they needed, and they just throw it in somebody else's script, change some variables, and then boom, and charge a customer for it. Like that was the business. This is early 2000s. boy, I can't even remember why I was talking about this ridiculous story, but I remember why I was talking about it because I used to have that in the job descriptions for the QA department. I had to take it out. I was like, I can't have VB6 in my job descriptions in the mid 2000s or the late 2000s. I was like, VB, and it was only they could only use 6 because that was the only scripting language that the tool would use, because it was just an old garbage tool. Like you should be writing like scheduler applications. You should be using Python, or if you that company was all Windows, so you should be using the latest PowerShell or whatever. Like PowerShell 4 was out and they were still using this tool. I'm like, guys, everything this tool can do, like I can write you a PowerShell script with like 4 lines that does what this tool does in 87 lines.
Well, and there's also third-party tools that do all this sort of stuff
big
really,
time.
really easy. Like there's a tool called Automizer. It costs $400.
Yeah.
For the site. I mean, right? It does all sorts of scripting and scheduling, and it does conditionals and does triggers and alarms. So it does
man.
backups, whatever you want it to do. It's real cheap and easy. And it has a scripting engine built into it to boot, so you can make it your own. But I think we were talking about this because this is something that is necessary, right? And how do you fit that into an Agile PMO?
Right.
I think one of the ways successful Agile PMO would cycle their people through. So if you have a project team, it's important that when the project goes to maintenance, hypercare, that some level of skill from the team transition through, at least for a while. Because if you've just got junior people trying to break fix, right, and they don't have the knowledge of how the system was built, the business logic, etc., it's going to be harder. To respond to, especially to respond to those things that are urgent fixes. So potentially you could schedule your teams and structure your teams in a way where everybody has to go through that, just so that they can understand the pain points that are happening there.
Yeah, of course.
So with a view to avoiding them to begin with.
Right. This is more of like somehow we fell into like a segue dark hole of like this is more of like an operations conversation that we're having now, because I would think that what you just said is valuable to me as an operator, because if I were to spin up a team, I would want some of the people, even if they're senior people. Maybe not. Maybe I don't know. I don't know. Like, I'm willing for my opinion to be changed on this one, but I would think that I would want to have my team that develops the software stay on for a while. At least some of them stay on for a while in the maintenance period, just so they can have some experience of like these are the things you have to deal with in maintenance if you don't do them right the first time, right? Like, you know what I mean? Especially like the senior guys. The senior guys may not be on the team at that point, and the senior guys may be the first. Actually, the senior guys may not have ever been on the team. They might just bounce in to help with planning, just like a team lead. Bounce in to help with planning, bounce in to help with architecture, and then bounce out of the team. You know what I mean? And they may not even be there anymore. Right. But so you may have your mid-level, or maybe even your most likely it's your junior guy. And in the example I used before, that guy was a junior guy at that company. But yeah, you might have your mid-level guys, or maybe your mid to senior level guys, someone's in that like supervisory, mid-level supervisory kind of position. But I think you're right. I think it's a good experience. The reason I say this is probably more of an operations, this is becoming more of an operations conversation, is because I think as someone running the PMO, or at least somebody managing the PMO, like a mid-manager in the PMO, I think you would want to pay close attention to, or at least have some kind of like amount of time that you don't want your top-notch developers on maintenance periods. Top-notch is probably not a great way to say it. You don't want your permanent developers, your permanent employee developers, or whatever. You don't want them in the maintenance period for more than 3 months, 6 months. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the time period is. It probably depends on the project, to be honest. But like, I just want to say, okay, the main phase of your project is over. You're going into maintenance mode. You can keep this resource for 3 months, and we're going to go to that resource and tell them, like, hey, the standard amount of time for you to stay on this project after we started cutting people, whatever, is 3 months. You're going to be on it 3 months, and then we're going to start looking for other opportunities, other projects to send you, or whatever. Or maybe start at that level, you kind of know what projects are going on. You kind of have your, maybe not your Gantt chart, but you basically have your timelines, your high level timelines. So you know what projects are coming up. So you're probably talking to those people saying, "Hey, this other project's coming up soon, and if you're interested in that, maybe we'll go." Or if you're not, or maybe if you have other things going on, or maybe like if you're taking classes, or you're going to school, or you have personal things going on in your life, or you're going to go out on maternity or whatever. Maybe I'll keep you on the maintenance project just so you can have some stability, and then you understand that like we're not dinging you on your career. We're just going to keep you there for you. It's like a back and forth kind of conversation. But like all that's part of operations. Operations is like talking to people about their situations, looking at what work they have, looking at what's coming up, and kind of talking together and agreeing. Like like very little of that kind of stuff. Like corporate America's terrible at that kind of stuff. But I see this like you don't want to keep your best resources on the maintenance period. I understand. Like it's a harsh thing to say. You know what I mean? Like this is podcast. This is the podcast of going back in time and also saying harsh things and then kind of wheeling back on them. Like I don't know why, but yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be a harsh thing to say. I mean, like you don't want to keep your best resources on projects that are over. You want them at the vanguard of what you're doing. You want them at the cutting edge of what you're doing. You know what I mean? I think that's probably reality.
It is, but it doesn't have to be so cut and dry. Like it's not like you saying to these people, look, you've worked on this project, you've built it, and now you're going to maintain it. Mm-hmm. It can be a balance. So you can have a group of people that dedicate only a part of their time to the maintenance area, and yet the majority of their time is spent on the next project, right?
Yeah,
that may work.
I could see that. I could see weird lighting stuff. I could see. Like if you had a lead developer or whatever that was on the project who's now like one of your senior guys or whatever, I could see like telling him, hey man, dedicate 10 hours a week just to check in and maybe help these guys get past blockages or whatever. Right. Help a peer program. That would be a good activity. You know what I mean? A dedicated day of the week to just do nothing but peer program.
Yeah, I mean, the light side of it is just be available in a consulting capacity on an as-needed basis, right? Because your need isn't really predictable, so you're gonna need 10 hours every week. But if you need to spend a couple of hours this week and 3 or 4 hours next week, just be open to flexing that. But that requires the understanding of people who are over this other project that you're on.
Right.
So again, coming back to the Agile PMO, the way that should be structured, I would suggest, is so that it allows for that flexibility. So that person who is on that other project, like the person who is overseeing the project, isn't going to come back to the PMO and say, I only have this person part-time, right? I need him full-time. That's what needs to change, I think, is that give and take, right? Because it's good for the company in multiple projects for people to be able to do this.
Yeah, but I mean, even the Scrum Master product owner in the Scrum model, I'm sure there's people out there that are like, stop talking about Scrum. I don't use Scrum. Even the product owner and the Scrum Master in the Scrum model, the suggestion is not to dedicate them more than 2 projects, teams, to more than 2 teams. So like that kind of suggestion probably, again, like we're kind of stuck in operations mode right now. This is all about how you operate your PMO. I mean, you probably could like operate a PMO well and use traditional methods and probably not have a lot of problems or whatever. Like maybe yes, you're not as effective or whatever, like we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. But not as effective, but very predictable may be desired. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But I feel this is more of an operations problem than anything else. Like if you have a lead guy who's involved in 8 projects, you're setting up your lead guy for failure, man.
Absolutely.
That's kind of ridiculous. Like you need to get more lead people if you want to have a lead on every other project. If you want to have a lead who's a permanent employee who you trust and who gives you unfiltered feedback, et cetera, like a lot of people do. Then you need to unfetter that person. You need to unbind that person. And developers, this is, I'm going to show my bias here right quick. Like developers are probably the worst from being like, oh, I can do that. Yeah, I can get that done. And then they're working 80 hours or whatever. Like every lead developer I've ever worked with, lead slash supervisor slash director of development, whatever title you give them. It's basically all the same. Manager of development doesn't really matter. I don't think I've ever met a manager of development who worked less than 60 hours a week, and that's just like ridiculous. That's a ridiculous ask to ask. You would never. I can never see going through an interview like bring that up in your interviews. Like, hey, you're prepared to work 60 hours a week minimum, right? You know, at least a day on the weekend, you're going to be involved in upgrades or outages or customers blowing up and can't do whatever. Someone needs to reboot whatever. You know, no one else has got the master password and you do. Like, nobody would ever take that job.
No,
Doesn't matter. I don't care what the pay is. Nobody would ever take that job.
No, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very true. But, you know, I do think that going back to the Agile PMO, organizations are still struggling through the way to structure them.
Yeah.
And some have actually done better than others, right? So the ones that have done better, what they've done is they've said, we're not the old PMO we used to be,
Yeah.
right? So we're not necessarily agreeing to carrying forward those things that we've grown up with.
Mm-hmm.
And we're open to coming up with new things. And we're also open to something big, which is we don't know the answer. Like how we should be structured. We're going to try something. If
Yeah.
it doesn't work, we'll change it. We've talked about this on a previous podcast, the whole concept of experimentation. Be
Right.
open to that and inspect and adapt.
Right.
Those ones that are doing that are becoming more able to fulfill their mission, right? Becoming more effective than those that are just simply agile in name only.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And they're still underneath the surface, the old PMO.
Yeah, I don't like. I probably understand that the least, which is the people that are just paying lip service, and then trying to continue what they're doing while the world kind of changes around them. Like that's, I don't know a better way. Like it strikes me as like kind of sad to be left behind. Like it's very lonely to be left behind. Like but you don't have to. You don't have to be left behind. Like you can see the things that are happening and then kind of try to change with them, or
If you're open to it.
I mean, I guess you're right. Yeah, if you're open to it. If you don't really see it as like, oh, this is just a fad or like a 20, 25 year fad. Like I mean,
I only need a couple of those in my life.
I mean, there's it's a very weird fad. But I don't know. I don't see it as that difficult. I mean, if you're effectively like the organization I was talking about before, if you're effectively operating an organization where you have an army of project managers and you have an army of BAs and you can basically spin up what it takes to start a project, and you're going through these phases or whatever. Like, I don't really see. I don't think it's that hard to transform that organization. To be effective. I mean, basically what people are doing is they're bringing you money to execute on their projects. And likely these people that are bringing you money, they don't have IT infrastructure of their own. They're asking for you to build up the IT infrastructure with the money that they give you. So I don't see it as that difficult to basically transform the way you're doing business. I mean, the only thing that might be difficult is you have to invest in training your project managers who we can kind of go back and forth about whether retraining the way that the project managers have learned their whole career to do things is the appropriate way of doing business. We're back in operating mode. Like whether retraining your employees that were doing things a certain way to change the way they've been doing things, that's one thing. I mean, I guess the harder thing to consider there is the people that you have that are project managers by trade, are their personalities the type that are open to adapting to a different way of working, and can they let go? Because like a traditional project management to me is very much about not letting go. I've worked with project managers. I should get one of the project managers I've worked with before. I'm on good terms with almost every project manager I've ever worked with. And I'm still connected to almost every project. I like project managers, man, because they're very detail-oriented people. You know, they don't let details go, and that's me. That's my personality. I don't let details go, man. I don't like to wing it and just figure it out or whatever, which is probably weird working in the agile space. You got to figure everything out as you go along. But like that's probably not true. Like it's probably somebody screaming at me over the internet right now. It's like you do make plans. You just don't make the plans until you absolutely have to make the plans.
Yeah, and you also don't make very long-term plans.
Yeah,
where you
right,
can't predict
right,
the future, right?
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's not me. I like to make long-term plans, and then I like to change my plans and adopt other plans. Like, but I don't mind that. So, no, the thing is, like, I could see, like, as a career, going through a certain amount of exercising a certain amount of controlling behavior. That's not a great way to say it, but it's very clear when I say it what I mean by that. Exercising a certain amount of controlling behavior and then pivoting to be like completely the opposite. Like it's not controlling behavior anymore. It's just influencing.
So for a lot of PMOs, keeping the same people you had before, this becomes really difficult because at the end of the day, it's a mind shift, right? And it's difficult to achieve.
It's a big mind shift.
It is. And so, I think those that are doing it well, what they've decided to do is to bring in people to kind of jumpstart their truly agile PMO, right? Not just a rename. Bring expertise in, jumpstart that, train people, stay with them. So don't just train and leave, right? Stay with them for a project or two. Make sure that you take your PMPs with you and, bring them along with you. And then leave them only when you can see that they're able to run with it in the new way. Those are success, but it requires an investment, right, by the organization, bringing somebody in, rent for a little bit, and change the culture by changing the mind shift.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's like, it's an investment, but I mean, what bring in a half a dozen agile coaches, embed them in your, like, if your organization is like 20 project managers, bring in a half a dozen agile coaches, embed them for a year. That's not that much money.
It wouldn't even probably take that much, right? Because you'd have your showpiece projects to begin with.
Yeah, you certainly would, and you probably start with your top tier project managers. You know what I mean, and then they would retrain. All organizations think, well, we'll send somebody to top notch training, and then they'll train everybody else internally. They all do that kind of stuff, but I just don't think it would be that difficult. I think there would be certain people that would never get it, but you're going to run into those same people even in agile teams, dedicated agile teams. You're going to run into people that just don't. I don't see a reason to do this event, or I don't see a reason to whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to run into those people all the time.
Yeah. Yes. All right. They're everywhere.
So do you want to pivot and talk about the other side? So is a project management office and a product management office, does one transform into the other, or are they just completely separate concepts? We're pivoting to part 2, by the way.
Yeah, and again, a great question. So other than having the same initials, I think the product management office is a different animal altogether. And here's the reason why. Unlike a project management organization, you're actually vested in the product as a product management organization, right? You own the products within your PMO.
Right.
So the whole product lifecycle is within the purview of the product PMO.
Yeah.
Which means you have to have people that are coming up with the need. You have to have people that are coming up with the design of it, how it's going to be contributing to your overall organizational portfolio. All of that has to happen within that PMO, not just the execution part, right? Which is, now that we have a vision, we know what we want to build, we know why we're building it, we've done the research to figure out that we need to sell X amount of it to break even or make money, whatever it is. Now we've got to go build it. Well, the Agile PMO we talked about earlier is the execution side, in my view. The product PMO really owns the product, and then the structure of how to deliver that. So you have your product owners, you have your product managers, right? They're the ones that are responsible for the P&L of the whole product.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was just going to point out. I was just going to point out the operators on one side where we're talking about they're building product teams or whatever. In that whole model, we've assumed that somebody has come with the business idea, where we talked about this in a previous podcast that was actually pretty good on the topic, which was the product managers, customer-facing product managers, and the internal-facing product owners may or may not be the same people together, but they may be separate people. in the original in the first discussion about the project management office, we assumed that those people are already there and available and working and have a vision and stuff like that. In this instance, we're assuming that those people work for this office.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that's a. I'd like to see an organization where this is actually set up, where they have because it seems like that's a lot of firepower to put under one roof, And I guess I could understand it in the project management office. I could understand it a little easier because you have the project. Oh boy, too many PM designations. You have the product managers, basically the people with the ideas. You have those people, and those people may or may not have budgets. And then those people with their budgets are coming to the project management office to get a team and a whatever, and then they're servicing. But the other way around is the product management office owns all those resources. Is that the other way around?
Well, yes and no.
Okay, all right.
So a product management office typically kind of operates under a chief marketing officer, let's say, ultimately, right? As the person who has the vision plus the financial kind of like the backing. And on the other side, you have the Agile PMO, the operations side, plus the execution of the projects, etc. They tend to be under a COO, right? Again, to your point about talking about operations, chief operating officer. And those two are not the same, obviously, right? So one is coming up with the business rationale of the why and the what, and the other is, now that we know the why and the what, this is how we're going to deploy, right? But they have to work together, and so I think the mix varies in different organizations, but the successful definitions of these wouldn't be here's a prescribed order of an Agile PMO, an Agile product management organization. It would be in your business, in your company, what makes sense, right? And you mix your own.
Yeah,
that's probably what I would say on that.
Would they have both? Would they have a product management group and a project management group?
Large companies probably would, especially if you had a diverse portfolio of products.
So
right?
one group would be responsible for basically the product owners, and the other group would be responsible for bringing you the teams and potentially the scrum masters, I guess. But Oh, that's interesting. I worked on a team once where I worked on a team once where the that was actually like that. I can't remember. It wasn't a PMO, whatever. That was like the PMO, project management, product management were not the terms that were used in this organization. But the way the organization worked was you had a group of business users, basically product managers, the customer-focused product managers, and those product managers had budget from their own organizations, and they had to come to the IT group in order to get developers and scrum masters and resources. Actually, developers and scrum masters and product owners actually. So basically, the product manager had money, and they came to the IT group, and the IT group had a product owner, scrum master, developers. They spun up a whole agile team. Whenever anyone who was a product manager came over and asked for, gave them budget to produce a product. And that was I was a scrum master in that organization. The issue I ran into in that organization was the individuals bringing the funding. They always wanted to have a lot of say in how things got done rather than what things to get done. Like the proper way would have been to send the money over to fund the project. To fund the development, the feature team, basically, with one or multiple. I think in my instance, there were 3 teams. I think as a scrum master, I had 3 teams, but in the larger grouping, there were 5. That was when I was a scaled scrum master, and there was I think there were 5 teams underneath my grouping. It was a real cluster. It was a real issue too, because some like 3 of those teams were in one time zone, and then another one was in like the UK, and another one was on West Coast. So it was a horror to try to get everybody in one room. It was just terrible. But I don't know why I remember that. But I remember the situation I ran into was trying to because the person who had the money basically felt they could dictate any process they wanted. So they kept coming back to this is really specific. I probably shouldn't have got into the weeds, but I'm here in the weeds now, so we might as well keep going down this rabbit hole. I remember them continually asking, like, when's everything going to be done? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't even know what everything is. Why do you keep asking that? You have no idea what everything is. And you have 5 teams to align on this everything. Like, nobody knows what everything is. But like, they had something in their head about what the final solution looked like, and they wanted to, like, they probably I told them when I started, I was like, we could spend 2 weeks just seeding a backlog to get everything written down. But I was like, as we start developing the solution, everything is going to change, and it's going to become something completely different. So you'll have wasted 2 weeks of your budget. So instead of that, why don't we just start working with our individual product owners? Because the teams did not share product owners. They all had their own product owner, which is actually very good in that situation. But the problem is, like, the product manager in that instance, they kept changing what they wanted. So all the product owners had to keep reshuffling their backlogs.
Yeah, where have we seen that before, where a person bringing the money in says how they want things done, right? Rather than just what. But yeah, just to go back to the structure of it. So it is also an interesting idea where a product management organization has the product managers, customer facing, product owners as well, that are inward facing to a certain degree, right? But they're not in the Agile PMO. They're over in the product management organization. Mm-hmm. And you may even be able to bring people through your company where they start off as product owners, because as a product owner, you don't really have to have that P&L responsibility. Right, so you kind of work your way up from there to be a product manager. Where you own a product, a line of products eventually, maybe.
I think that's a great, like, career path wise. I could easily see starting off as a business analyst, just from the experiences I've had, I can easily see starting off as a business analyst, getting that deep technical or domain, because it could be both, and or domain knowledge, understanding how teams work, how projects start from early ideas to requirements to what the team needs, to how going through that main ramp period and building stuff and going into maintenance, like go through a few of those projects, you'll probably have a very, like, solid understanding of how actual software projects work, and then moving into the product owner role, now that you know something about what you're doing, moving to the product owner role, and then going a few successfully delivering a few software projects, right, through maintenance, and then moving on to other things, and then delivering those successfully, moving on, having some problems or whatever, getting through the problems or whatever, and then being the person that your product managers go to because they know they can delegate to you, and you'll run with it, and you'll basically, like, they'll only have to check in with you and occasionally steer the ship back in the right direction or whatever, and then boom, your career trajectory is set on product management at that point. Yeah, I could easily see that.
Yeah, and some organizations would start somebody off directly within the product management organization at a kind of the lower rungs, if you like, of the ladder, and call them product analysts.
Sure.
These are people that are working on a single product and maybe even specific feature sets of a single product, and then they work their way up.
Yeah, I've actually seen a lot of different titles for the product analyst, business analyst, business systems analyst, product analyst, data analyst, or whatever. Like, I've seen a lot of people work in that pseudo product owner role, but not called a product owner. Basically, they get delegated. Like, I see this this is like an anti-pattern, but it is an anti-pattern, but it also is a stepping off point to true product ownership, because what a lot of times what happens is you have product managers who delegate product ownership roles to a BA on the team or whatever, and then the BA steps in as the product owner, the day-to-day to the team product owner. I see this in large organizations. It is an anti-pattern. However, when it's done well by the business analyst or whatever, whoever it is, data analyst, whatever they call themselves, they're basically setting themselves up to step up to the next level. If they do it well, they're setting themselves up to step up to the next level. We don't talk often enough about like how people got to,
No, we don't.
Yeah, like how people get to certain levels or whatever. I feel like there would be a lot of it'd be a big benefit to people to hear about, like, well, I got to here and then I jumped to here and then I did whatever. This is what I did to get to wherever.
It would be. Yeah, I think that's an excellent topic. I also think that, going back to our kind of current topic of Agile.
Yeah, please.
Agile PMOs and product management organizations, they need to have that kind of defined career path for people, right? But not rigid.
Yeah.
Right. So that people can find their own path through it. Because you could have somebody, to your point, about these titles. You have somebody who works as a product analyst initially as their first job, really.
Yeah.
But they may take a liking to analytics.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, let them go down that path, right? So there's been very different journeys through this, that I've seen at least at different client sites.
Yeah. To kind of put a bow on the topic of the PMOs, like either project management or product management, like I'm not really sure like which one, but so here's my challenge to you, which is build me the ideal PMO. I don't know what PMO means in this instance, but build me the ideal PMO. Like, what does that look like if you're building it from the ground up in an agile organization?
So I think there's two different bows here that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking about a product management organization or an office, PMO, it centers around, this is really a strategic construct, right? So it centers around the reason for your organization to exist, right? What are we here to do?
Yeah.
And from there, it would be, are we a provider of XYZ, which are products, whether they're services or products, doesn't matter in this case, right? In that case, that PMO needs to have representation from finance, because they need to understand that you're spending money to make money.
Sure.
It's an investment.
Sure.
It needs to have the vision of a marketing person who understands the needs of the market, or be a trailblazer and establish a need, right? It needs to have somebody who can say, okay, this is great that you're wild dreaming here, but bring you down to reality. We can only deliver X. So it needs an execution type person there. Typically, it's like a COO or somebody like that. And this is going to sound weird, but it also needs somebody to say, how do we do this in terms of people?
Yeah.
Is it your chief people officer? Somebody needs to be there from a quote unquote resourcing perspective, right? To say, that can go anywhere from you grow your own talent, you rent, you outsource, etc.
Yeah.
So that may not be a heavy lift in terms of the involvement they have with the product management organization, but those are the areas. Now, as far as the structure goes, I don't think there's a prescription for it. I think it depends on the industry. It depends on the DNA of the company as well. But loosely speaking, right, what you need to have is somebody who can say this structure exists and they are kind of like the keeper of it.
Yeah.
They don't own it. What they're doing is they're simply making sure that it functions, right? Rather than driving it, they're simply making sure that it's working, and anything that gets in the way is taken care of. In a way, they're kind of like a scrum master of it, right? A catalyst, if you will.
Yeah.
And so start with lightweight structures, right? That would be and that applies to either of these two ideas, whether it's a product or an Agile PMO. Start with a lightweight structure. Be prepared to change it, and initially be prepared to change it often. I think that same advice applies to the Agile PMO, but the Agile PMO has something a little different, and that is, if you already have people that were working in your traditional PMO, you need to get those people to buy in that this is a different way of working. This is not just a same old way of working using different language. That's going to set you up for failure. And that's what we see all the time, though, right? People are saying they're doing something different, using different language, doing the same old thing.
Yeah, all the time.
So change that, right? So in that environment, you do want your operations person there. But I think you also want somebody, this is actually happening in some companies now, which is very kind of refreshing to see, to inspire innovation. So oftentimes projects are, coming in after the fact, right? Something has already been sold and now we've got to deliver, right? That kind of thing. Inspire innovation within your team. And this isn't about product only, right? Sure, product, but also process. How do we do things? Well, there isn't one way that's set. This is how you should always do things. So if you don't know up front, again, be ready to change, but just say, well, let's try this. Adopt an experimentation mindset. Try it. If it doesn't work, change it. Avoid that blame culture. It was your way and it didn't work, right? Avoid that. So that's what I would suggest, I think, initially. If you've got people that are PMPs, use their best talent, which is, to your point earlier, right? Detail orientation.
Right.
And then also their planning mindset. They're planning all the time. That's great. But they've got to temper back and say, you can't plan 9 months ahead and predict a date for events. Like, this is the date of your UAT. Get that mind shift in there and say, involve your users now. Bring them in. Show them a skeleton. Right? So that's what I would suggest. It sounds easier said than done, obviously. But I think the underlying message is you're not going to get it right first time. Chances are, right? You'll never nail it the first time, or the second time, or the third time. So be prepared to flex every single time. Change.
I would expect less a project management office, but more a product management office. I would expect them. Honestly, I would expect them both, but the product, because it seems to me that they're embedded with some level with the product owners who are beholden to their teams. I would expect one of those organizations to be doing some kind of program level retro or retro over the whole project, which includes a bunch of teams. So basically some kind of scaled level retro to be identifying these things that they could be improving at an organizational level. Like what we talked about earlier, which is if you have a certain amount of A-level talent, but they're stuck in maintenance mode, like that, be clear with them how long they're going to be in maintenance mode. Be clear with, like, if you're a more traditional project management where you have contractors and they're going to be here for a 6-month engagement or whatever, or if you're looking to end your ramp period, and if it's July now and you're looking to end your ramp period in September, like, just be clear with these guys, like, hey, look, it's going to be a couple months. I'm going to start to end my ramp period in a couple months. Like, that would be the time. I mean, like, I was with an organization once where they were real cloak and dagger about, like, all their project teams were all contractors, and at the end of the ramp period, they would start rolling people off, and it was like every single time, 100% of the time, all the projects were like this, but every single time they were super cloak and dagger about when they were rolling down. I'm like, or when they were spinning down. I'm like, why are you trying to hide when you're spinning down? Just be clear with all these people have to go get different jobs anyway. Just be clear with these people of what your timelines look like. Well, I'd like to start spinning down around September. Maybe I need to go an extra 2-3 sprints, maybe or not, or whatever. Just be clear with like what your target is, and if you have to push the target, then cool. Some of your people may cut at the time that you specified earlier, because they may be quick about their plans. Other people may not be quick, and they might just hang on. But there's no reason for you not to be communicative with the people that are working for you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think being clandestine about it really doesn't work anyway. In long term, people figure it out, right? So they kind of read into it. When you tell them September, they go, around July, I'm going to start to look. So you may lose some good talent ahead of time, and that will hurt you in the end.
Yeah, but that's if you're not keeping permanent employees, like, that's the nature of your whole business. That's the nature of your whole business. I don't know why you would try to hide it. So like part of this, I think, and you said it too. You're like, well, you're going to need somebody from your marketing wing. You're going to need somebody from your HR/people operations wing. You're going to need somebody from whatever. Like those people would have a lot of influence in helping you construct a better organization and helping you say, look, there's no reason to like you're not very good at manage. Like if you're not very good at managing conflict, you should get somebody to help you. If you're not very good at whatever, you should get someone to help you. Like if you're not very good at managing a software project, you should get someone to help you. Like there's no reason to do it all on your own, you know?
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that also equally applies to a product management organization. There's less experience on that side of the house, right?
Yeah.
So bring people in. There are some excellent people out there that can come in and put a structure in place, but know that you may have to flex and change that structure as you learn more, right? As you grow.
Yeah. Well, that's like we didn't touch on this, but like that's we barely touched on like bringing in agile coaches to get you through a period to kind of transform or whatever. Like, but eventually, like you would want to have, if you were building I don't know where they would be placed appropriately, project or product groups. I don't know where they'd be placed appropriately, but you would want to have agile coaches there to kind of help you through these principles, you know.
Well, you have your agile coaches that are product focused, right? Yeah. And so they might be better positioned in a product management organization. But yes, you're right.
Yeah, and they probably could help you transform to say, like, you know, we're not good at these things, but we need to constantly be reaching out to people inside of our organization and getting that talent in, and having them help us and asking for help and that kind of stuff like that. That's just a different culture than what I'm talking about now. So it's all part of transformation, I think.
Yeah, and there's some specific skill sets that are needed, but kind of difficult to grow from within, right? If you're not if you're not already coming from that space. Like I'll give you an example. So design thinking. Mm-hmm. How do you get people to suddenly start implementing that technique? Right? Yeah. They don't have the experience. They don't have the knowledge. So get someone in, train you, and then let them show you the way. Not just train, but stay with you for a project. You know, where you jointly develop design thinking under their guidance initially. And then you grow from there. Yeah,
that like in that instance, that would be an agile coach who's more focused on the product side, kind of coaching you along and helping you understand, like, hey, check it. Like, they have to be kind of embedded with you along the way to be gently directing you to say, hey, rather than making assumptions or doing whatever, like, why don't you run this past customer? Why don't you bring a customer in to look at it now when we have this question, this lingering question that we're really not sure about, and just bring the customer into the conversation. After a few times of that, I think just a few times of that, and that will be enough to kind of direct you on a new path. Even if you're really set in your ways, just a few times with that gentle prodding. Kind of now I've worked with some people who are not open to suggestion at all, but so it's one of those kind of things that we're like, you can't force someone to ask for help,
right?
So I understand at the same time, like, I'm throwing that out there and it sounds great, but some people are like, Brian, that's not going to help me at all because my product owner or whatever thinks that they understand everything and they have the answer to everything and whatever. Yes, I get it. Like, there are some people who are just not open to it. But these suggestions are not necessarily for those people that are not open to anything. They're just going to be people that are against it, don't want to change, don't want to do anything. Okay, listen. My best advice is I give terrible life advice. My best advice is to just drive around those people. Right. Just avoid those people. And you're not going to get a lot of, like, other people out there will experience this too. They'll be like, well, what do you do with, you know, managers that are resistant or directors that are resistant or whatever? Like, like, people give me this advice all the time. It's like, just leave that company, leave that team, leave whatever. I've always been the guy that's like, that's terrible advice. Like, I don't want to leave my organization. I like my organization. I built the organization, but like, sometimes that's like, there's no way around that.
There's only so much you can change or have influence over, right? But I mean, the thinking behind these PMOs, to kind of just put a cap on this. You could do things like, for example, many companies do or at least they used to, user conferences, annual ones, right? Where you bring users in and the company listens to their pain points.
Yeah.
And also uses the opportunity to showcase some of the newer technology.
Sure, yeah.
Here's the reason you should upgrade, or here's a new product for you, etc. So at one of my previous companies, one of the things that we used to do is have these conferences, paid for by the company, invite users in for the weekend, usually at a nice location like Las Vegas,
Yep.
let's say,
Yep.
places like that. But
Yep.
it was 2 days of just listening to them for the first day, and then the second day the company would demo the products. We changed that. We changed it to listening to them for a day, and then the second day was for them to then meet with each other and come up at the end of the day with real issues that they wanted to address, but their top 10
Yeah.
collectively, not a single person would tell us, because everybody has their own top 10 otherwise. And this was brilliant, because instead of showing them something we came up with from the lab, this would be like, you guys go away and brainstorm for a day, right? Most of the day. And then for 2 hours at the end, come back and select your own spokespeople, and they will tell us your top 10 collectively that we as a company should be working on in the next quarter.
Yeah.
We're not guaranteeing we're going to get all 10 done,
Yeah.
but we are guaranteeing we're going to start with your number one and then your number two.
Oh man, what a I've been at companies that do the same thing, but and they had not the model you had, the first model that you had, the one that got outdated. They had that kind of thing going on, but yeah, what an interesting tool, because that would, not only is it a tool to say, hey, come to our conference and you'll have input into product direction, but like for the guys that don't want to spend the money or whatever to come to the conference, like they kind of get left out of.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
Yikes.
this model actually worked well for us, to the point where the user group formed themselves into an incorporated company as such, right?
Oh, wow.
And then we would work through them.
Yeah.
So it went to a different level. But it really does help if you're doing those kinds of things rather than just showing people what you came up with, right? Because you can't think about their needs. You don't know what they are.
No, you constantly have to be checking back in. Well, I mean, we started this sidetrack with design thinking. You know, with design thinking kind of is like, it's another one of those terms in the space that's starting to not mean anything. But you know, the point is, if you have a product management organization, they should be encouraging at the top levels. They should be encouraging meeting with the customer and demoing your feature to the customer, and involving the customer, a customer-centric approach. Like, they should be constantly pushing the product managers, who in turn push the product owners, who in turn push their teams to be constantly demoing.
Yeah, so as you mature as a product management organization, why not have your customers in the PMO, right? So they represent the customer's voice, but they're actually part of your PMO.
Sure.
Right? But that's a different level of maturity.
Well,
that takes time, doesn't it?
I don't think it does, because of your product yeah, I do think it does. Because your product managers, like, that's a good chunk of their time is keeping those relationships with the customers. Like, they're very close to the good salespeople, where they have good relationships with people at customers, and I can go to them. Or maybe I'd involve the salespeople. If I was new to a company, if I was new to a company and I needed to quickly establish as a product manager, and I needed to quickly establish my contacts, I'd go to my salespeople and be like, who do you talk to, man? Like, who are you working with? And start there and try to work through the organization from there if I don't know anybody at all. And then start establishing my pool of people that I go to and I pull in. And, hey, man, do you have 15 minutes on a Tuesday or whatever? And I'm going to add you to a call, maybe a regularly scheduled call or whatever. I'm going to add you to a call, and we're going to demo a few things. You give me your feedback, just 15 minutes, and you know, we'll already have something going. But yeah, like that. I would encourage, if I was up at if I had several product owners executing on my needs as a product manager, I would definitely encourage them to do that. Like, don't wait for me. Talk straight to here's my contacts, here's the people I know, and talk straight to them. And I'll be on the call. I want to see how they're interacting with the customer, but I agree
with you. But I also think that there's a lot of a lot of merit to multi-level, especially when you talk about selling, right? So you have your salespeople, then you have your product owners, and you have your product managers, and why not even your technical architects talking to people in their perhaps in their technology?
Sure.
So multi-level is I think the key right there, right?
Yeah, we talked about that last time, we talked about that last time. I feel like it got left out of the conversation. Like I feel we assume so much that may not come straight through to the viewer. But there's absolutely no reason. Like when I say your product owner or product manager or whatever is demoing features or whatever, I always assume that your development team, or at least a portion of your development team, because maybe not everybody is involved in the feature, but I always assume that your full development team is in the room. I couldn't even imagine why you would want to separate the groups. I always assume that your full development team's in the room. Now, the only thing I said this, I think in the last or maybe 2 episodes ago, I don't remember. I said you want your product owner to be. Luckily, no one's listening, so it's fine. No, because somebody would have commented on this. I said something along the lines of like you want your product owner to be in the middle of your developer and your customer. But what I meant was your product owner. Your developers and your customers should never be there just by themselves without anybody from the product ownership / product management wing in the room. Like, don't just leave those guys unsupervised together. Like, you should be there with them because I don't want the customers. On one hand, I don't want the developers just working on stuff without the product owner involved because there may be issues that come up from that kind of stuff. I've seen people go off on a tangent because the customer asked them to. But also, I don't want to put the developers in a situation where they're on the spot.
Absolutely, it's not fair on them, right? And so some of the times it's that overt pressure, and they might promise stuff that they can't deliver, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Or promise stuff that's not congruent with the direction of the product. But you definitely want to make sure that somebody's there from product. To kind of moderate that. Well,
also, someone from development who only sits on one team, they may not know what all the other teams are working on. I mean, in a scale environment, yes, they'll probably go to shared demos and stuff like that. But they may not know or shared reviews or whatever. They may not know what every other team's working on. So I wouldn't want to put them on the spot without a product owner in the room to. And the individual developer is not the one who is tasked with being accountable to the customers. That's the product owner. Like the product owner can be like, oh, I'm not sure about this or whatever. I'll follow back up with you.
Exactly.
Or product owner / product manager, right?
Yeah.
A lot more communication. You know what I mean? A lot more customer-centric, direct with the customer type of approach, and I think that's good enough for the PMO discussion. Whether it's a project management office or a product management office, is still confusing to me.
It is confusing.
They're separate units. Like whenever I see PMO, it's interchangeable. Whether I'm not sure if they're a project or product management.
It's alphabet soup out there.
It's it's a weird event. So
Let us know what you think in the comments below, though.
I know. Yeah, Agile podcast questions at Gmail. I had a very difficult time with that last podcast. Ooh, I had a difficult time this time as well. Agile podcast questions. Thank you. Good night.
Stay safe.
And stuff.